Hello and welcome to part 1.2 of the Venice project. First of all, I'm going to launch the Epic Games launcher here, and I'm going to go to my library, find the project. I've got various ones here, but you will just have the one unless you've been experimenting. Great. And it should load fairly quickly and bring me up in a blank screen. You'll recall that because I'm screen capturing, I didn't save where we ended up at the end of the last session, which, if you recall, was a brick wall, a bit of fire, a guy standing around for no good reason, and a bit of a cheesy sofa. We're going to move the game on in this session because we're going to go to Venice. So we've covered, if you like, the very fundamentals of assembling materials. What we're going to be doing in this session is bringing in characters and placing them within a world. So I'm going to launch the level. If you've not got this display up here, just go to Content and go into the KSS folder, Venice Pack, Maps, and you'll find one called Venice 1. Is it demo or test? I think it's the demo. Venice demo. Let's try this. Yep. Here we go. Now, if you launch this, it's the first time you've launched it, you may find that it takes some time to compile shaders. These are the various textures that exist within the model. It's opened up on a vista of Venice, and you can see already here the lighting needs rebuilding, so I'll get that going now. Okay, I may pause this at this point. Okay, I paused the video. I'm restarting now, just allowed it time to rebuild the model. So let's have a quick look around here. We'll start by having a look around in what's actually in the content. So I can go to the top level. I'll get software Venice Pack 1. The maps we've already looked at. This map we're working on obviously provides us with this. Let's look in the meshes folder. So we've got a folder and some subfolders. In here, you'll find the building blocks that are assembled to make the model you see before you. So a combination of architectural features, some walls, windows, bridges, and then we've got further ones that divide this up further. So some additional walls there that we could use. Get back up here. Textures, these are things that are applied to the actual objects to make the materials. So a material may be a combination of textures blended together. I've not looked at roofing. Yes, obviously fair enough. I'm not sure we've got it in dev here. These are some ones they've obviously thrown in there that are not used that you may want to play around with. So there's a text sign saying miscellaneous, another one saying walls. Use should you wish. Then demo scene parts. Again, I imagine that these may have been supplied but not necessarily employed in this particular version. And finally, balconies, which, as the name suggests, gives you a variety of balconies. You can see one variation. I think it's probably that one there. It's been dropped in the scene, moved, scaled, rotated to add to this composite that you see here. Okay. So, quite a convincing looking scene here, and consequently, if you look in the world outliner, it's a massive long list. It just goes on and on and on and on, and conveniently you'll see that some of this has been divided into folders, which at least we've got a whole section on lighting there, the street lights you can see. We'll come to lighting and how you can vary that, change that, and use it to create dramatic scenes in the section on building, which will be, I think, week 3. So we have the whole panoply of objects assembled there to provide our scene of Venice. And somewhere in here, we will have a player start. But unlike previously, where we just had maybe half a dozen objects, we're going to have a bit of bother locating that, scrolling back and forth. Now we can easily locate an object by, if I come up here, player start, and there it is. It's the only one with those characters in it. So fine, there is a player start here. So anticipating this, what I'm going to do, so we've got a player start, so let's just play. And Venice disappears. We're just left seemingly in this orange void. Let's stop that a moment. There is our player start. And maybe what we want to do, we should already be on it. Yes, there is the player start. I pressed F. Now it's centered in the viewport. So where on earth is this player start? There is Venice above us. So the first thing we really need to do in order to get a satisfactory player start is to move this somewhere where it actually starts in the middle of the model. So I can do that as we did previously last time. Let's probably use our left view. That would be good because I can now grab this and get this maybe roughly up to street level. Press F to zoom in a bit. Okay, just looking at this wireframe, I'm reckoning street level is probably there. So now go to the front view, see where we are on the model. Yeah, there. Now maybe top down. There's a little bollard in the road there. That's a gondola there. I can see these are street lights, so I'm fairly safe probably if I put it there. Let's go to perspective. Now let's go F. Bad size. Yeah, this is the thing about piercing the floor. I didn't judge it precisely, but now we're good. And then I could, if I wanted to, use the rotation to change that light blue arrow to see the direction it's looking. So now I've got the player start. For press play. Better. Let's come out of that again, and if I click and hold move up, press the arrow key, so I'm now going to then look back down on it. What we'll notice is, in keeping with the nature of film sets, is that this provides just enough scenery in order that you can get convincing vistas from certain angles. So the direction I was looking at for the player start, you'll notice I was looking off into the void. Now, we have several options here. We could simply rotate the player start and be looking into the scene and therefore have all the Venice goodness arrayed before us. We could choose to dip into the folder of meshes and actually build out the scene. So we could extend the walls there. We could basically build on the pattern that's established here. So to provide some degree of continuity, we'd probably look at, yes, there's a certain number of street lights, balconies, railings, and so on and so forth going on, and just extend this as far as we wanted. But we probably have enough here to make at least a modest scene. So what we're going to do, let's go back to the player start. So highlight player start, go to F, there it is there. And yes, so we're looking that way there like that. If I was just to rotate that around, now I think much better. Yes, you could pull back because it looks a bit cluttered in the foreground, but we're going to be coming on to that when we do creating the movie. For the time being, just want to get the player start in the midst of the world, so we're not looking out into the void. Okay, so let's stop again there, just to scroll back so I don't get that ugly blue dot. Now, in identifying that the player is buried in amongst lots of other things, what I tend to do is to create folders and organize this material, because it's really quite frustrating after a while to be searching for the actual stuff that you're going to change rather than the world that you've built. So just by looking through this here, even with all these folders collapsed, there is all this stuff here that I really don't want to be scrolling through to find what it is that I'm after. It is arranged alphabetically, so I could go down and get as far as P and then find player start. But what I'm going to do, and this isn't the most elegant of subdivisions, I'm going to go to the first one of these objects here, go to the last one of these objects here. You can see they're all kind of selected in the viewport. It's all kind of there. Now if I right click on this selection and choose move to, create new folder, and unimaginatively I'm just going to call this stuff. Give me a please. Oh, I can't capital F anymore. Mystery, right. Stuff. Move to folder stuff. Then, when I collapse stuff, suddenly I've got my world outliner back. Now, what I do want to do, and hopefully I haven't boxed myself in too much. Now I've got enough room to be able to do this. I'm going to take my player start, because I may actually want to have access to that, and drop that up here at the top level. Now I want to close down stuff. I can close down these buildings, but that now exists outside of that particular folder there. Now, as you build up a scene, you probably might want to come up with a more coherent system of folders and items, so you can quickly go to the areas that you want. But I'm just showing you that to indicate that you needn't become overwhelmed with the amount of material in a scene. Be mindful that if you click on an object in a scene as part of a folder, then the whole thing opens up, and you'll need to go up here and scroll it back up again. But it does give you a little bit more room to play with in this window here. Okay, so we've got the player start placed somewhere within the scene itself. The intent of this section is to get some characters in the scene, and to also import some animations in anticipation of the third section of part 1, where we actually pull this together and create a short sequence. So, if you recall what we did last time, now because I didn't save it, I don't know. Yes, Mannequin Mobile is here. Good. So what I'm going to do is drag this Mannequin Mobile into the scene. If you recall, was a mesh here like this. There it is. Sense the scale. That looks okay. Just drop them in somewhere there. So we now have a character in the scene, just standing in that sort of generic pose. What I want to do to create a scene is actually have a couple of characters. In the final section of part 1, we are going to animate characters, but we're just going to be using variations of this one. There's a whole separate section on characters where we create them from scratch, but for the time being, we're going to work with this mobile mannequin figure and variations thereof. So let's just dive into what this mobile mannequin looks like and what it's composed of. So if we go to the mesh, if I was to double click on this, this will launch the window, which shows you the figure, and you'll see it's composed of a skeleton with all these different elements here like this, and this is the aspects that the animation writes to and moves in time. There's also a kind of physics model that shows you the bits of the body that are moved and come into connection with things, and there is the mesh. This is the kind of composite here. Now it's actually made up in this instance of 2 different materials. You have, and you can isolate these, you have what is the chest logo. If I hover over this, it gets me the name of that. And so if I isolate that, I could zoom in, and we can see it's the Unreal Engine 4 crest. And then we have the actual bodysuit there like that. So 2 of these textures map onto this. So we can imagine that it would be technically possible to, simplistic level, to swap out the UE4 logo. For the benefit of Epic Games, you imagine that they could change this to UE5 as and when that came along, without doing too much extra work. And then we've got something that consists of everything else that makes up the coloration of this character. So what we want to do to delineate these characters, because I could drop in fact I am, no, I'm not going to do it once I've changed the character. I could drop in a second one of these, but if I'm having a dialogue with these, it's going to be quite irritating and annoying to be able to distinguish them, because they do look identical. So what I want to do is to go into the material that composes this, and I'm going to do the simplest thing I can imagine, which is to change the color of both of them. So let's go up to the Mannequin Mobile, and if we go into materials, here we see there are the two materials I mentioned previously. One doing the chest logo, one doing the body. So let's open up these and see what these consist of. Okay, so we're not going to bother with the logo because even if we change that, it's such a small element, we're not going to get an immediate hit in terms of altering that. So actually what I'm going to do is create an instance of this. I don't want to muck around with this. This is, if you like, the base level of the body. But if I create an instance, it's something that I can modify without altering the underlying texture. So I can still pull in the mannequin and it's still got this texture. I haven't modified it beyond repair. So I created one instance of this. In fact, let me call it, what are we going to do this? We're going to call this Mr. Green material. Okay. Now, if I open up this, here you'll see here is the material. And because of the way it's been constructed, it's done what's called expose one of the parameters that informs this. Usefully, it's the body color. So what I'm going to do is check this, and now, a bit of luck, now I've said Mr. Green. So obviously I need to bump up the green, take these down, RGB colors. So 0, 0, 0, and up to the blue, haven't I? Right, okay. Basic reading of letters. Mr. Green is now green. So now if I save this, we now have a green material. I'm going to do the same thing again, and in the time-honored fashion of Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Green, we better have a Mr. Pink, I suppose. So create material instance. We call this Mr. You can't have spaces in these names, so either underscores or dashes. Mr. Pink material, we call this. Now, imagine what I'm going to do here. Exactly the same. It's going to have a lot more red, isn't it? But pink is... pink. So I can go, oh, that's way too much. So there. Now I need to think what makes up pink. That's going to do for pink. Okay, so I save that. And now I've got these materials. Okay, grand. So let's come up here. And let's do a copy of the skeleton mesh rather. So duplicate. So we call this Mr. Green, and we'll do another one. Call this Mr. Pink. So let's go into Mr. Green, and what we want to do here. There's various ways of doing this. So if I pull this over here, what you can do is, I've got some materials, haven't I? Mr. Green material. If I highlight this, I can then click this. It says use selected asset from content browser. There you go. Now we've got a lurid green character. Save that, close that. And as you can imagine, I'm going to do exactly the same again. Go up here, mesh, so Mr. Pink, and actually make Mr. Pink the colour he was always intended to be. The other way I can do this is if I highlight this, get the drop down here, and it will search for materials, and there is the Mr. Pink material there, and now a fetching shade of pink. Save. Right. So now, take that character out of the scene, backspace. I'm going to have two characters in this scene, a Mr. Pink and a Mr. Green, sorry, and Mr. Pink. Place them in the scene there like that. Player start. There you go. There they both are. Fantastic. Right, the next thing I want to do is, given the issue I pointed out earlier about the sightlines, what I'm going to be doing is setting up the initial kind of position of these characters so that very dramatic, very simple, dramatic situation. Just want them coming towards each other and kind of meeting. And what we're going to be doing in the sequence section coming up next is to find interesting ways of showing that by use of different camera angles and so on. So what I want is starting points for both of them where I know I can have a lot of shots going on that aren't going to cause me to be peering out into the void. Now, there are some challenges here because what I'm going to do once I've put them in place is bring in some animations. Venice, bridges, changes in height, going upstairs. These are additional things that one needs to bear in mind. So one thing I could look at is maybe having them meet at this apex here. One, say, coming down from this way. So the path of one character coming down through here. That all looks good. It's kind of clear in terms of sight lines. Maybe we'll have an endpoint there. And the other one coming down. Got a bridge there. So, all right, we may take on the challenge of doing a bridge, but how far back can we come? That's quite tight there, isn't it? So maybe we don't need to do the bridge. We could have the character instead. Yes, there's bridges everywhere. I'm going to get around the bridges. Can't really go there. So we are going to have a bridge, but because we want to avoid a turn, I'll leave a turn for you to work out. Let's maybe start about here with the other one. Okay, so what I need to do is drag one character here, basically put them in place. But this is where they're going to start, and then we'll have them making the journey to that corner, another one over there. So let's, thankfully they're outside of this thing here. W, get their arrows up now. Yeah, that's good. The thing with this is I'm not entirely sure of the direction, but by the same token, I haven't got the handle the right way. Green, pulling back here. Looks good on the floor level. That's fine. Lined up maybe a bit too far over. We will be tweaking this once we come to the timeline. So I can probably come back that sort of far. That's good. So Mr. Green's going to be over there, and we want Mr. Pink here. We need to rotate the character. Press F, I guess. Yeah. Okay, one little thing to point out, this I'll cover this more in the building section. You'll notice, particularly evident when I rotate, so if I go back to the rotate thing here, it helpfully, in this instance, rotates in units of 10 degrees, but there may be situations where I may want to move, rotate, or scale in more precise forms. Now, the reason it's kind of locked down to these units is because of these checkboxes. It snaps, and it snaps to this particular level. So I've got the option to disable snapping. Still got that on 10, haven't I? So if I disable, now what am I talking about? There's the degree one. Apologies. That was for units. So let me demonstrate that one more time. Turn off the snapping. Now, precise measurements there. I don't want to do that. I want to keep it nice and Control Z. Right. So I want to turn snapping back on. Or I can have finer granularity in the snapping. These are the units. So I could just crank it right up to 90 degrees. It's very kind of primitive. So it's only going to turn in 90-degree units. But typically these are set in kind of midpoint. So I'm going to leave the snapping on, turn this back on. This is for positioning. So in units of 10 at the moment. Sometimes you will need to turn this off to get the kind of fine meeting point of particular elements, and another one for scaling, scaling in units of 0.25, just to show that there. So keep these on, certainly for purposes of this exercise. And now we have our two characters there. In fact, looking down the line of the direction of travel of this, it might be that I want either pull him over or slightly in less than increments of 10, because he may be ending up in that direction there. But we can come to that when we do the sequencing itself. So I've got my characters in roughly the sort of position I want, and I'm fairly happy that I've got enough space there to do some interesting coverage of staging the meeting of Mr. Pink and Mr. Green in the next section. One other thing I want to do in preparation for the next section is to bring in some animations. So in the first section, we covered importing material via the content pack. If you remember, we brought in the mobile starter content by going up here, content pack here, starter content. We also then went to the marketplace. We purchased free of charge the mobile mannequin and then added that to the project. Another way you can bring in material is to import assets. And we'll be covering this in more detail with building, where we bring in object models and buildings and drop them into a particular scene. But in this instance, what I want to do is to import some animations. Animations have a whole section to themselves in week 2, I believe, where we build animations up from the Mixamo engine. But for the time being, I've downloaded a few basic animations that we're going to be using to stage this walk. So I now need to, probably to keep my material organized, let's have a think. I could create a new folder and call it animations. Yeah. Double click this and now choose import. You'll find a link to these animation files below the video. So I've downloaded some animations here, and in fact, do I want all of them? I don't want the mannequin mobile. Should be able to go here and unselect the mannequin mobile. So we're not going to use all of these, but let's just bring them in. Import. Now, when you bring in animations, you normally have a skeleton that you are going to attach them to. So I don't want to import the mesh. Don't want to import a new character. Instead, I've got a skeleton. And the skeleton is the mannequin mobile skeleton. There. And if I choose import all, with a bit of luck, it should be bringing all of them in. So this was the benefit of doing duplicates of the mannequin character. So I haven't changed the underlying skeleton. They both use the same skeleton, but they do look very different because I've changed the material from the different versions of mannequin mobile. So we brought in some animations. Some of these are game specific, like strafing. This is where you're kind of walking sideways. But the ones we're probably going to be working with most, unlikely to be using running, because this is quite a sedate area, and I'm sure it's discouraged, is largely walking and idling. So let's have a look at what this constitutes. So if I double click one of these, here we go. Got our character walking. This is a generic walk. When we come to the section on characters, we'll look at how we can modify and change this. But you can see it's using the mannequin mobile skeleton, and it's just walking. And very importantly, it's walking in place. The distinction will become apparent when we look at characters. But walking in place means it's for me to determine how far that person moves when they're walking. And just to see this in action, I can just impose, or in fact I can add an animated character into the scene here like this. This isn't the way you'd want to do it, but if I press play now and then navigate around to there, so I've added animation, and there is our character walking along. Now obviously what we want to do is to apply this to the particular instances, Mr. Green and Mr. Pink, and that's what we're going to be doing in the third video in this section. We've managed to import Venice. We've corrected the player start position. We've had a look around, got a sense of, yes, we need to box and cox in order to make the most of this scenario, we've created variations of the base character we imported in the first part of this series, and we've imported some animations ready for us to create the short scene that forms the basis of part 3. Don't forget to save before you come out of the program, Control S, or make sure you save everything when you close the program down. So thank you, look forward to seeing you in the next session.